Welcome, everyone, as you're entering into our space. Welcome to the Data for Change workshop. My name is Koselki. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Find Help 211. I'll be opening up the space just in a few minutes, but just while we're here, we're just going to allow for some time for folks to join us. We're expecting a few folks, a large number actually, so just we ask for your patience as we allow folks in. Thank you. As you're joining into the workshop, please make sure that you're testing your sound and you're hearing us clearly as we're coming through. Also, where you can, please mute yourself to make sure your mic is not providing any feedback into the. Thank you. And we'll be starting very shortly. Oh, we hear somebody on the phone already.
This is my third webinar for the day.
Okay.
Isn't it beautiful?
Thank you for joining us. And if you have your mic unmuted, please mute it just to ensure that we're not getting any feedback or interesting conversations on the side. Thank you. And we will, yes. Yep, go
I'm
ahead.
wondering, hi, everybody. I'm wondering, as folks join, if we can invite them to start introducing themselves in the chat. I always, when I'm participating as a listener in these things, I always really enjoy like the side connections that can happen. So I was thinking if folks want to introduce yourself, maybe your name, your organization, your role, and I think that's a nice thing to do.
That's a wonderful idea, Sophie. Thank you. And so we're going to see them come through and as they pop up. And we're just going to give it another 1 minute and then just going to look to my colleague to give me the signal that it's good to, we're good to go. As we're manually letting folks in one by one. Thank you. Welcome if you're joining us for the first time in our space. We'll be starting shortly. We're just letting folks in. And as folks are joining, they're just introducing themselves on the chat. So please have a look at folks that are joining us from lots of great places today, from government, from nonprofits. So this is great. I'm glad that this is having traction on many fronts. Okay. I'm 1 more minute looking to my colleague to give me the signal that we're good to start. And thank you for your patience for those who joined us right on time. We want to make sure that we respect that. So, all right. All right.
I think the food got delivered. I'm gonna go.
It's a great foundations popping up. All right. So we're hovering at about 61 folks right now registering and online waiting. So to be mindful of our time, we're at 1:35. So why don't we start if that works for everybody? And then folks who can join us will do so, continue to do so throughout the session. So again, thank you so much for many of you who are joining us today. My name is Kosel Key, the Director of Strategic Partnerships here at Find Help 211. As an organization, we've been hosting this series of workshops that's going to be taking place throughout the year. Can I just have our slide turn to the first deck first? In the beginning of all these capacity building workshops, I just like to pause a bit and welcome members of this group who's joining us today to our second workshop of the season. And we wanted to bring folks back to just the beginnings of this capacity building change data for change project model, and just to remind folks that we are a collective of capacity builders that's coming together to share our knowledge around the collection of social identity data. Partners are at the table are CASA, SHIP, and Logical Outcomes. And this intention of this workshop, next slide, please, is really a third iteration that's been offered to the sector 2 times before. And this is really our opportunity now to continue to offer the sector to think about and begin to think about the social identity door. Sorry, there's a specific question that's coming through me that's just throwing me off. Yes, the meetings will be shared through all of this, the materials and stuff will be shared soon, if that's the question. So social identity data collection is something that we are very interested in as a community social services sector. And these series of capacity building workshops are meant to really help us all to begin to learn and think about collecting social identity data with the intention for us to start to collect better data so that we can advance better outcomes for equity deserving groups, and to can think about as a sector how we can continue to collect the methodologies and use the same tools and have the same practices as a social services system. And we're hoping to build those practices, build those muscles together, because we know individually as agencies it can be costly to go through these trainings. So these trainings are free for the sector. It's free for anyone who's interested. And we'll be offering these trainings and recording these trainings and putting them up on a website after, with all the resources and tools free to the sector as we go out throughout the year with these training series. Can I get the next slide, please? Just go back. As I mentioned, these are a series of ongoing community engagement opportunities and learning opportunities throughout the year. This is our second one in the stage 1 plan and build phase. These sessions of trainings are built from a design, data equity design stages. And so every time that you're joining us on one of the continuums of the model there you'll see. Today's presentation, we're really lucky to have Logical Outcomes join us this afternoon to help talk about the plan and stage and build part of data equity. And so without further ado, please help me welcome Sophie and Meta to the conversation, who will open up our conversation today about their training. So welcome. And again, thank you so much for everyone's patience as we sorted ourselves out in the beginning. But the floor is yours and the audience is yours.
Thank you so much, Kosal, and welcome everybody. It's such a joy to be able to be here with you today. And Kosal, I just want to thank you for including Logical Outcomes in this project. It's a real honor to be able to contribute to capacity building and learning around data equity in the sector. And I'm really excited to be able to talk about it today. So I'm going to just introduce myself quickly and hand it over to my colleague Meda to introduce herself. And then we'll get into our slides. I'm going to keep chat open and try to pay attention to it. I'm sure Meda will do that too. Because we do want to have an interactive conversation today. We've got some Menti, slides that we can use, some Menti polls to make it a little more interactive. And I'm just saying I'm going to do my best to keep up with the chat while also focusing on delivering a useful workshop. So at the end, we'll have time for questions and discussion, which I'm looking forward to as well. So my name is Sophie Llewellyn, she, her pronouns. I'm the Director of Evaluation with Logical Outcomes, and I've been working in this sector for quite a while. I'm really excited to be here today. Meda?
Hi everyone, like Sophie said, really excited about this, and again, looking forward to the opportunity to learn together and share what we do, but also learn from everybody in the group. Yeah, my name is Medha Arora. I work at Logical Outcomes as a research and evaluation analyst. And yeah, I'm excited to start today.
Okay, so Logical Outcomes is based in Toronto on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. As people who live and work in this place, we acknowledge our responsibility to respect and uphold the treaties that govern this land. These include Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. We also recognize the enduring relevance of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, a treaty between Indigenous nations in the Great Lakes region that binds the peoples who inhabit this land to share it well and protect all of the living beings and resources that bring it to life. A little bit about logical outcomes. So we're a Canadian nonprofit with a mission to build evaluation and learning capacity. We offer research and evaluation services. We build monitoring, evaluation, and learning systems. We deliver evaluation coaching and capacity building. We're getting into developing and delivering AI solutions for nonprofits, and we also design client management systems. So we are really right in the data mix in the nonprofit sector, working very closely alongside program managers and other nonprofit staff, as well as with funders. Our aim is really to support the efforts of the organizations that we work with to share the positive impact of their work, to identify areas for improvement, and to action those recommendations that come out of the research that we do. I want to mention that just something about our approach to the work that we do. We try to bring a pragmatic lens to our work. We really understand, because we work alongside folks who are we know are doing the work off the side of their desk, and that's how it has to be when there's not enough funding to really support full-time data people in many organizations. So we know how busy folks are and all the barriers that they're up against when it comes to evaluation and learning. And so in the work that we do, we really try to focus on low barrier solutions that nonprofits can actually implement and that are actually going to be useful to them and the people they serve. That's my spiel about logical outcomes. We're a bigger organization than this, but Meda and I wanted to include some details about the folks who founded Logical Outcomes, because I would say that our orientation towards data equity really comes from our co-founders' work and experience. So Neil Price's long experience working with and for organizations that support Black youth and communities, and Gillian Kerr's roots in rehabilitation counseling with people with disabilities, which has informed her focus and our focus on accessibility and the use of technologies to reduce barriers to access.
Yeah, thank you, Sophie. So just our agenda for today, we're going to cover our goals for the workshop, why nonprofits should be collecting social identity data, why that's so important, recognizing data harm, acknowledging that data has been used in unjust ways, in harmful ways, and talking about that. Which brings us to data equity, the importance of data equity. How can we use data equity throughout the data lifecycle? So right from collection of data to the final archival or deletion of data, that whole process. And then today's focus is more going to be on the planning stage. So when you have a data project, the first stage is, of course, the planning stage. So looking at that stage, focusing there and looking at what are the priorities for that. So data governance policies, community engagement. And then finally, we'll provide a whole list of tools and resources that we hope would be helpful for you as you go through this journey. Okay, so our goals for today is to talk about the concept of data equity. Ship already spoke about this in the last workshop, so we hope to build on that. To advance a culture of collecting, analyzing, using, and sharing data in an equitable way. We hope to recommend tools that can support you to plan and implement equitable data projects. And we also want to provide opportunities for reflection and collaboration with peers in the nonprofit sector. We're so lucky to have such a big virtual room of folks across sectors. So really want people to connect, form connection that can help them as they do this work. So to just kick us off, let's see. Gonna start this Menti poll just to see where we are at. So if you could go to menti.com and the code's on top.
I can enter the code into the chat too.
Yes, thank you.
And okay, the link is, hold on. And SID, just to remind everyone, is social identity data.
Interesting. Wow, so we really have like a nice breadth across options, with a lot of people saying that they collect and analyze social identity data, but not in a consistent way. Thank you for the engagement, everybody. Maybe just give it the last 10 seconds or so.
Yeah, this is really interesting to see. And as someone who designs surveys, of course, now I'm second guessing the way that we've given out these categories, because sometimes it is important across different projects to ask about social identity in different ways. So there can be good reasons to collect and analyze social identity data in ways that are not always consistent, but can be specific to certain groups of people who you're working with or certain kinds of projects. Just wanted to acknowledge that.
It's also interesting to see that there is, a good amount of people who collect social identity data but don't actually end up using it.
Yeah. Yeah, and folks who have standard processes for collecting, analyzing, and using social identity data to improve their services. So I'm hoping we'll have a chance to hear from about those processes and practices towards the end of the workshop.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, just in
Okay,
the
this is
interest
great.
of time, I'm gonna go on.
Okay, so we're starting off by making a case for collecting social identity data. I was reading a New York Times op-ed recently by the American novelist and writer George Saunders, and I came across this sentence, and it just really struck me, the elegance of the sentence. And to give you, I'll read it out. To behave honorably requires that we be in contact with the truth, to be able to supply honest answers to simple questions. And the op-ed piece was taking the White House to task for firing Dr. Carla Hayden, was the Librarian of Congress, on vague and lazy grounds related to her pursuit of DEI. And the piece was a defense of Dr. Hayden, but more than that, it was arguing for the importance of intellectual curiosity and courage more broadly. And I just thought this is a really nice orientation to the case for collecting social identity data, as well as other forms of data like outcomes data and client feedback, so that we can identify problems and improve processes and outcomes for the diverse people who use nonprofit services. So we need to be able to answer questions in our sector like who uses our services, who isn't using our services, who we would expect to come and use them, and who might be facing barriers to access, and what can we do about those barriers to remove them? Who is benefiting the most from our programs, and who isn't benefiting as much, and how could we serve those folks better? So those are the kinds of simple questions that we want to be able to answer in the sector, and this is one of the reasons that we collect social identity data. So looking, I have some notes here that I want to get right. So this is I think, a really well done example of reporting on race-based health data from Toronto Public Health's dashboards that everybody, I'm sure, will remember from the pandemic. And the graph shows how Black and racialized communities were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, how these groups bore an undue burden of illness, which policymakers needed to address in order to achieve more equitable health outcomes. And last night I was reading the Black Health Equity Working Group's EGAP report. And it reminded me that race-based health data collection was not the norm in Ontario at the outset of the pandemic, and that it was the work of communities, racialized communities across Ontario who advocated for race-based data collection during the spring of 2020 that led to a change in provincial policy and a mandate to collect race-based health data to inform the response to COVID-19. And so when this is done well, social identity data allows us to reveal critical differences in experiences and outcomes across diverse communities. And it shows us, in this case, the consequences of structural racism for people's health. And it supports policymakers in deciding where and how to invest resources in order to combat pervasive inequality. Next slide. And this is kind of a more modest example from my own experience of social identity data collection use. So this came out of, this is a chart that we used for the Ontario Trillium Foundation's outcomes measurement platform, which Logical Outcomes was lucky enough to develop and manage on behalf of OTF from 2020 to 2024. And so that platform included surveys featuring outcome measures and also process measures and demographic measures. And it included an evaluation coaching component. So as evaluation coach for the platform, I got to meet with nonprofit staff and support them to configure their surveys, develop data collection plans, and make sense of the data that came in. And I remember I had this experience meeting with a program manager from an organization that explicitly serves girls. And we were looking at the demographic data together from the survey to find out, okay, to what extent was your survey sample representative of the girls who you serve? And we took a look at the gender data, and she realized that quite a few of the kids who were coming to her program identified as non-binary. And it was a real eye-opening moment for her. And she said, oh, we need to implement we need to talk about gender identity more in our group discussion. And maybe what we could do is bring in like a pronoun check and talk about our pronouns. And it just struck me as such a lovely moment of realizing that the assumptions that had been made about the people who were using the service were just a little bit off, and expanding understanding of who those people are, and then making sure that everyone in those rooms felt included. So this is another reason to collect social identity data about the people who nonprofits serve.
Okay, and we have one more, Matty. It's the same link that you would have been on. And the question now is, has your, like Sophie just shared a really nice example. So has your agency gained important insights by collecting social identity data?
It's really fun to watch the levels change.
Yeah, I'm like, where is it gonna go next? Where is it gonna go next? Yeah, it's really interesting to again see the breadth of it. And I think that's what's nice about being in such a mixed group, is that you get the opportunity to learn from people.
Okay, so lots of people in the room have probably, lots of them have gained important insights. So I'm hoping we'll have a chance to hear about those.
Awesome. Okay. Oops.
Okay,
Yeah.
so with that case made to collect social identity data, it's really critical when you're considering a new data project, to recognize the harm that can be done. So we know that data projects are never politically neutral. They're always wrapped up in power relations. And an equitable data project starts by recognizing that people with more privilege often get to decide how data is collected and used and analyzed. And people who have less privilege rarely have that choice or control over how their data is collected, stored, or shared. And as our colleagues at SHIP, their presentation a few weeks ago showed, far too often data projects have been used as a tool to extract information from people, especially Black, Indigenous, and racialized people, people with disabilities, for the purposes of domination and control. So when nonprofits collect data, they do expose their staff and themselves, their organizations, and the people they serve to risk. And it's important to understand that and think through the different kinds of risks that are at play. So there's the risk of exposing data to mishandling and misuse. And misuse of data occurs whenever people's data are used for a purpose to which they don't consent. And that could be accidental, so a data breach where people's personal information is accidentally made released, or it could be through bad actors within an organization doing things that they shouldn't do with data out of curiosity or whatever it is. And so that's mishandling and misuse. It could also be where data is interpreted in ways that are harmful to a community. Disrespectful data collection processes that expose people to upsetting questions and experiences also do harm. And so do unjust processes that concentrate the risks and burden of data collection among one group, for example, service users and frontline workers, while the benefits of the data collection, like all of that learning that happens, flows up to funders and leadership at an organization. So this is what we really want to avoid. We want to think about it carefully. We want to mitigate those risks when we're doing equitable, so that we can do equitable data projects.
Thanks, Sophie. And that brings us to this question is exactly what Sophie said. What can nonprofits do in the planning stage specifically to mitigate these risks and to contribute to the positive processes and outcomes for all? Which brings us to data equity in this entire project. And data equity is the principles and practices that guide data work through a lens of diversity, justice, equity, and inclusivity. And having this lens can really help us to better understand the power dynamics that are in data projects. Help us understand our assumptions. What are we assuming when we're doing this data project? What are some hidden biases we might have? What are the interests of different people in this project? And also allows us to just create better outcomes for the people we serve. So we're going to be looking at data through the data life cycle and going right from how when data is acquired, so data is collected through surveys, through secondary sources, to how it's processed, how it's stored, how it's used and analyzed, how it's shared back with different audiences, and then finally how it's deleted or archived. So we're going to be discussing very practical ways that data can be looked at with data equity, different practices and processes we can use at every stage of the data lifecycle. I'm noticing that somebody's mic is unmuted. So if you could please just check and mute your mic, just because there's a little bit of disturbance. Thank you.
Okay, so looking at data equity through the data life cycle. Each stage of the data lifecycle, which Mita just described, provides an opportunity for us to pursue an equitable, community-centered approach to data by maximizing participant benefits and minimizing risks, ensuring respect for people and communities, and promoting justice at every stage of the project. These are three three principles that can guide data projects so that they are more equitable. And they come from some really great work that the Urban Institute has done. So we've included a link to that resource, and it will be on it's among a big long list of resource links that we're going to share at the end of this this presentation. But I just wanted to, I think the first two principles there are really clear, but the last one around promoting justice at every stage, I just want to take a moment to unpack. So here, justice is the commitment to the fair distribution of burdens and benefits among people. And this principle underscores that communities and people who bear the risks and burdens of data collection and data use, they deserve to benefit from research. It also emphasizes the responsibility to ensure that undue burden is not put on people who are unlikely to benefit from a given project. So these are the principles that guide our thinking about every stage of the data lifecycle.
I just wanted to add, sorry, that I know that, this session is supposed to be focused on planning, but the reason it's important for us to go through the whole data life cycle is that a lot of the decisions for even later stages are actually made at the planning stage. So while we're not going to go into too much detail over every stage, we'll do it in later workshops. It's nice to mention that. So right off the bat, you're prepared and you're thinking about all of the stages.
Okay, so equity in planning. The first point here that we want to linger on, and we'll come back to this later, is the importance of creating a data governance plan. So a data governance plan identifies who is responsible for data in a nonprofit organization. It includes policies and practices for each step of the data lifecycle, and it is a big undertaking that requires resources to pay for people's time and engagement. But it's really important step towards ensuring that an organization is collecting data in an equitable way. And the nice thing is that there are lots of great templates and learning resources that can help in putting together a data governance plan, and we're going to come back to those soon. So we're talking about data projects in a fairly general way, thinking about, I mean, nonprofits do a lot of data collection through client management systems, as well as sometimes ad hoc surveys, as well as sometimes more in-depth research projects. But I wanted to take a moment to think about how you plan out a discrete data project. And I'm hearing somebody who's unmuted. So if you could mute yourself, that would be helpful. Thank you.
I'm on a call right now, but what do you need?
No, it's okay.
What do you need?
Eyes related.
And yeah, thank you. Thanks, Ashley. Okay, so I just lost my train of thought here. Right, so whether you're planning a specific data project of any size, like even like an initiative, for example, to gather feedback on services that are provided to participants in your programming, it's really critical to engage community in the planning phase. And a governance plan should describe the processes that you use to do this. It's important to be clear about the research purpose and the research questions that you're going to be asking. So why is it that you want to collect data? What are you hoping to accomplish with that? The methods that you propose to use and the tools that you want to use, and to gather and the approach to data analysis that you're planning to use as well, and to gather feedback and ideas from community. And so by doing this, nonprofit staff and others who are involved in running data projects have a chance to work with community to understand how people feel about sensitive topics. And to ensure that the benefits to community when you're collecting data, especially around sensitive issues, that the benefits that are going to come out of that research for community outweigh the risks. It's also important to be aware of and to adhere to privacy regulations and data governance frameworks for Indigenous and Black communities. And so it's worthwhile to spend some time looking into, for example, the Black Health Equity Working Group's EGAP framework, which identifies principles of engagement, governance, access, and protection, to the City of Toronto's Black Community Data Governance framework, which builds on those principles, and to the excellent work that's been done by the First Nations Information Governance Centre on their OCAP principles around ownership, control, access, and possession of data, as well as the CARE principles, collective benefit, authority to control, responsibility, and ethics that have been published by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. Okay, so equity, we're through the initial conception phase of the project, getting into instrument design or designing data collection tools. It's really important to avoid unnecessary collection of personally identifiable information. So ideally, like in a perfect world, nonprofits would be gathering names and addresses and age or date of birth, race data, data around gender, et cetera. These things that don't change a lot one time. You know, that would get gathered maybe during an intake process. And then there would, you know, you'd have a way to connect other forms of data coming in from folks to that demographic information, maybe through an anonymous ID, right? So a user ID, so that you'd be able to maintain anonymity of data coming in. And you wouldn't need to ask people again and again and again about their race and their gender and their age and other demographic questions. That in the real world, that doesn't happen all of the time. And so we often will go back to people and ask them about demographics and surveys, for example. But there's some important things that we can do to reduce collection of personal information. And I'll just mention that I've seen many times, especially well in survey research among nonprofits, unnecessary collection of like email addresses, for example. I don't know if anyone's ever used Google Forms to set up a survey, but the default is that you're asking for somebody's email address for them to fill in the survey. So it's really important to do things like turn off that. If you want an anonymous survey, turn that setting off. Don't collect people's email addresses. If you need a way of contacting them, then you can collect that information in a second form that's maybe linked to the survey, for example. When we're designing, and I know I'm talking about surveys a lot, it's important to use other methods as well. But we do use a lot of surveys in our research, and I've seen that the sector uses surveys a lot also, and they do go out to a lot of people. So I think it's important to discuss them. So when we're doing survey design, we take a lot of care around demographics. So what questions do we really need to ask? What aspects of social identity do we need to understand, and how detailed do we need to get around different categories, for example? And there's always a trade-off around the length of the survey. We want to keep surveys short, and around specificity. Sometimes it's nice to have some very specific information, and around the risk of identification or re-identification. So these are things that we're thinking about when we're designing surveys, and we're trying to find that right balance. Whenever we ask open text questions, there's always a risk that somebody could identify themselves there. And so I will tend to include just a little reminder around the risk of identification, and will ask people, please try not to identify yourself in this open text question. Sometimes there may be a temptation to say, you know, my name is Sophie, and I was at your organization with my 2 kids on Thursday, and this happened to me. And so we like to just remind people, if you're doing that, then you're going to be sharing your information, your identity with folks who are going to see this data. It's really critical to obviously prioritize accessibility by providing data collection tools in the language that is most comfortable for the people who are sharing their data, and by using simple language as well, plain language that's readily understandable. We're going to get into systems and practices that protect privacy. This can be expensive, I know, but too many times I've seen examples of a user ID and password being shared by many different people in an organization for a survey platform, because survey platforms are expensive and they're often charged by the user. But the sector really needs to move away from practices like that, which do not safeguard people's privacy adequately. Um, when we design surveys, we try to choose short, strengths-based measures that are not a total downer to fill in. There are some validated measures out there that are, well, incredibly long to begin with, which is not respectful of people's time and places too much burden on the survey taker, but also so many measures that ask questions that are just devastating to read. And nobody needs to have that experience when they're filling in a survey. So we really try to use strengths-based measures like sense of belonging to local community, for example. And consider complementing survey research with qualitative participatory methods. And finally, piloting surveys is so important, or piloting any data collection form with community is so critical, especially if you're collecting data in languages other than your first language, to make sure even the best translation, it needs to be tested by actual people. And you need to, it's really critical to tweak your surveys and other data collection forms based on feedback from real users. It's amazing the kinds of assumptions that we can make when we're designing surveys that just really fly in the face of reality and people's interpretation of what we're asking them. So this iterative process is so important.
Thanks, Sophie. So coming to equity in data collection, now that we have the survey design or the whatever instrument that you're using, whatever data method you're using, what things to be aware of. So really being very conscientious of the fact that it takes time, mental, emotional time, energy for people to fill in a survey or to respond to any sort of data collection activity. So really avoiding undue burden, making sure we're being cognizant of, okay, what is necessary to know and what is good to know? Can we give people more agency and choice when it comes to what information they want to share? Leveraging existing touch points. So how can we build data collection systems within existing workflows so people don't have to come separately to provide their data? It can happen within the normal workflow that they have of interacting with your organization. Starting with clear consent protocol. This is so important. Having a clear, informed consent right at the beginning. And often, we design really nice consent forms that are very detailed and comprehensive, but are probably too much for someone to read. So making sure is, we also go through it in plain language and really highlighting what's key for this person to know, right? So maybe that at the end where you have, who do you contact if you have more questions? How do you say that, okay, I want, if somebody wants to withdraw their consent, how can they do that? So kind of highlighting very clearly what is it they really need to know and making sure that we try to offer different ways for people to really understand consent. Considering incentives around our area, again, acknowledging the fact that people often spend a lot of time with the data collection. If we're doing a focus group or interview, which takes about an hour or something, really honoring people's time and compensating them for that. And building in time to troubleshoot and pivot. Doing this work well takes time, right? So making sure we allocate for that time. And, if things change or, like Sophie said, as we pilot and we learn more, there are times that you might need to troubleshoot or pivot. Like we had a project recently where we had a survey and I went into kind of support data collection and realized that people actually needed help just going through the survey, if they need someone to read out the whole survey to them, which would take longer than we would expect. So just making sure you build in time for that. How can you pivot? How can you troubleshoot when based on your experiences? on the field in data collection. And then finally, in analysis and reporting. And this is really critical, right? How do we use data well without harm? And one of the really nice ways is engaging community members in sense making. So once you've collected your data, taking it back to the community and interpreting it, making sense of it with them, with their input. What makes sense to them? How would they interpret something? How would they understand something? Why do they think something is happening? And also being transparent about the limits of the data, and what that means is supposing you have a sample size of say 20 people, but you serve 200. So just being aware that it may not be representative, being aware that there's a, a survey or an interview can only get so much. So what are the limits of that data, and making sure we're not making any sort of extrapolations that may not be reasonable. Um, and then data reporting and sharing. Really, how can we disaggregate data in very clear and useful ways? Carefully considering and mitigating potential harms, making sure we're not perpetuating stereotypes, so we're taking a very strengths-based approach as we present this data. Again, based on whatever your research questions are, looking at the data through that lens. Sharing anonymized data sets with the sector to reduce duplicate data collection. I think this is so important. Like reusability is one of the fair data principles, and really goes to show that we're doing so much work, and sharing those results in anonymized ways helps people actually build on your research instead of just duplicating it. And one of the most important things, of course, is to return the data sets and research results back to community in a form that they can actually understand and use. Like so often that we hear people say that they filled in so many feedback forms or they've been contacted for so much data collection effort, but they don't know what comes out of it. They've not heard back from what happens. They don't know what happened to anything they said. They've not got any feedback about if something is going to happen, how it's going to happen, when it's going to happen. It just gets lost. And it's also demotivating them because there are certain groups that get asked for their data a lot without really getting anything back. So really making sure that there is that sharing back that's happening in ways that's accessible to different audiences.
Maida, can I just chip
Yes.
in here just to give some examples of that? Because that could include, it could include like a poster sharing really high level results of some learning, some research that you've done that goes up in a physical space. It could be a couple of posts on social media. It could be a town hall for a larger project where you'd be sharing back findings. Or if you're having an AGM, it could be like a 2-pager infographic that gets handed out to share the results of a client feedback survey, for example.
Thank you. And lastly, equity in archiving and deletion. So we do not want to keep data forever. Being very clear about how long the data will be stored, how it will be stored, where it will be stored. Empowering people to request destruction of their data. So allowing people to opt out. And in the consent itself, being very transparent about, data for this project will be kept for X years, not keeping data forever. And also building in systems and procedures that support this follow through. Often, when we're done with the project, it's easy to just forget about it and move on to the next thing because there's so much happening, which is why it's really important to build in like systems and procedures that support this follow through of knowing that after this much time, this data needs to be archived or moved or deleted or whatever your data governance policy dictates. But making sure that that process happens is super important. So if you want to add anything for that?
No, but I think this last point is really important because at the end of a data project, everyone's exhausted, and you just want to move forward. But it's really critical. So I can give an example from Logical Outcomes. At the end of our projects, we have a project closure checklist, and whoever is managing a project, they need to go through that checklist, and it includes archiving data in appropriate ways. And so it's just a process that, there's a notification, the project manager receives it, and they need to go through the process at the end of their project. So sometimes we need to force ourselves to do tasks like this.
Thank you. Okay, so that was all of the cycles, and now we're moving more specifically a little bit more on the planning stage. But before we go on, I just wanted to check in. We've been talking for a while. If people have any comments, any reflections, any questions you want to drop into the chat, or if you want to unmute and share.
I see Jackie just asked if we could share the project closure checklist, and I think we can do that. I don't have it in front of me right now to drop it into the chat, but we can definitely follow up with that.
Awesome.
And Marcel says, I want to add making provisions so that people can request to change or delete their data. Yeah, that's right. And depending on the nature, let's say that you are building out a client management system. I mean, depending on the nature of your system, there's definitely flows that you can create or that may be offered that can send notifications at specific times to people who've shared data with you, asking them for continued consent, right? Or if they're at the end of their relationship with your organization, they can be reminded about that, and they can be told that the data will be deleted after a certain period of time. So there's ways to build in some automation here. I know nonprofits, some of them serve thousands and thousands of people. In those circumstances, you certainly need automation in order to make it easy for people to either request, it needs to go in front of them, right? They need to have a form in front of them so that they can request removal or deletion of their data or a change to it, or they are able to, well, that's it. Basically, they can request it. Oh, yeah. Thanks for sharing that story, Jonathan, about intake assessments that were mandatory. So there's no way to opt out of them, and they're not trauma informed. And yeah, it's awful. So and sometimes those intakes might be imposed by funders as well. I know nonprofits can find themselves in a difficult position when a funder is requesting that a tool be used that is not trauma informed, and that's when some advocacy has to happen. Yeah, sorry, Meta.
No, sorry, I was just gonna say that, and maybe even when there is the intake assessment is mandatory, if it's possible to make some questions on the intake, optional was also nice. So even if people have to go through something, maybe limit, like, reducing what they have to go through in that intake form can also be helpful. So again, giving them some element of choice or agency is wherever possible is nice. Okay, I think one question and then I think we can go ahead. Mm.
Sangeeta is asking a really good question here about community engagement and whether it should happen during the data governance stage or after. I'm going to assume that community engagement should happen when developing policies and procedures around data governance. That is totally right. Yes. So these are two, we put data governance first on our slide here because we're going to talk about it first, but they go hand in hand. And certainly if one is doing community engagement well, then you'll be engaging communities around that data governance plan.
Absolutely. Like just the two priorities that we've really focused on for the planning stage for this presentation is data governance, which is the policies, procedures that ensure data is usable, it's accessible, protected, and handled in a way that's responsible, compliant, and also aligned with the mission of your organization. And community engagement. Really finding meaningful ways of including community members in decision making, not just data collection as is often done. Like Sophie said, these go hand in hand. They're not one after the other, but they really are complementary. So we'd like to learn a little bit more about, let's go next. about this, about how, like the organizations where you all work, like does your organization have clear policies and procedures for data collection, use, and protection?
I would say for logical outcomes that they're somewhat clear and documented. So this is a process that we are working on too, actually. And in preparing for this presentation, I was able to, well, I'm really excited about some of the resources that we're going to share with you momentarily, but these have actually been helpful to me in thinking through our privacy policies. And it's good to see that other folks are in that position of developing policies and procedures. So we're catching you right at the right time, and hopefully what we share today is going to be useful. And there's a comment here. It's really cool to see the distribution of responses here, but I just want to read out this comment from Protana, who says it's important not to penalize participants who choose to withdraw their data or responses. And that's really true. It's something that we always put in our consent forms for surveys, that your decision to participate or not to participate in the survey is not going to change your relationship with the service provider in any way. And I agree 100% about not taking away an incentive to participate. Although at the same time, I'm reflecting on my own practices as someone who designs surveys, sometimes with incentives, and the incentive is usually something that you're able to access after filling in that survey. So now I'm starting to ask myself some questions and think about how that process could be designed better, perhaps.
I think for anytime we do an interview or a focus group, we always say that if you choose to leave halfway or if you choose to stop in the middle, your compensation will not be affected. And it's not going to impact your relationship with the organization as well.
Mhm. And this is a little technical point and may not resonate with everybody, but we run our own survey platform at Logical Outcomes. We use a tool called Lime Survey, and Lime Survey collects partial responses. So as you're filling in a survey, it will show that partial response. It collects that information, and then once you submit the survey is marked as completed. It's submitted, and for me as an evaluator, it's critical that although we have partial responses in our system, we do not consider those responses that have been submitted with full consent. From my perspective, that clicking that submit button when you're filling in an online survey, it's like handing a piece of a hard copy survey to a researcher. That is the final part of a consent process. So it's critical if you have access to that kind of data. I think personally that you don't use that data, and it can be tempting sometimes if you have a low response rate and there's some quite lengthy partial responses in the system. But it's really important to respect people's ability to click away from that survey and not submit the data. And if they haven't submitted it, then it's not really yours. That's my perspective anyway, or it's not yours to use. Anyway, sorry, that was maybe a bit of a digression. So we're moving towards the final bit of our presentation now. Meta, do you want to reflect on what we're seeing on the screen there?
No, I just think it's really interesting, like you said, with people from all categories, and hopefully this some parts of this presentation or the resources that we share at the end will be helpful. And I think it's also going to be nice if we have time to invite people who want to kind of share tools that have helped them, or if they have sort of learnings from this process, people who've done this work already that they can share with everybody else.
Agreed. Okay, so there is a new data governance standard for the nonprofit sector for delivery of community and human services. And it's brand new. It was released on May 7th. I want to be clear that Meta and I were not involved in creating this standard, but there may be some folks in the room who were. I'm not sure. But the standard, I think it's having reviewed it for this presentation. I'm really excited about it, and I think it's going to be a really useful tool for the sector. So I wanted to take this opportunity to share about it. So it was prepared by the Data Governance Standard Institute. They've got a like 250 person strong technical committee. And the drafting team, it was an 8-person drafting team for this standard. It included subject matter experts from ONN, Ontario Trillium Foundation, the Common Approach to Impact Measurement, CMHA, the Canadian Mental Health Association, the New Brunswick Institute for Research, Data and Training, and CINDR among, well, that was the group there. And the standard specifies, it's not a terribly lengthy standard. We're going to look at it in a moment. It's very pragmatic and practical, and it specifies minimum requirements for the responsible and privacy preserving collection, access, use, sharing, and storage of personal information by organizations delivering community and human services. And this standard had been shared with me over email from various folks, but I haven't actually seen a workshop or a big release of the standard. So I don't know if folks in the room are familiar with it, but I wanted to, that may well be happening, but I wanted to use this opportunity to talk about it. Okay, so, and I see there's a comment about surveys, and maybe I'm going to come back to that if that's okay, so that we can get through this content around the standard. Just sharing the table of contents for the standard. As you can see, it's quite concise. And it covers. Sorry, let me just go back to my notes here. So it takes a very pragmatic approach. It's created with small to medium nonprofits in mind, and it weaves data equity throughout the standard, throughout each step in the data lifecycle that we've talked about. And the standard makes explicit reference to a number of normative references, including the OCAP and EGAP frameworks, which we've already discussed, as well as ONN's excellent framework for nonprofit data strategies, which we're also going to include in our tools and resources section. So it goes over the terms and definitions, governance and oversight, data collection, so standards for responsible, ethical data collection, data storage, data access and use, and finally data sharing and publishing. And it comes with a checklist, which as an evaluator is very, very exciting to me. The checklist, it's about 2 pages long, and it just operationalizes what is quite a complex and intimidating task by breaking it down into bite-sized pieces. So the standard and the normative references that it's built on, they make the task of creating a data governance plan a lot more doable for nonprofits. It is still a project that needs to be owned and managed and funded, but there are great examples and tools that can support you in this, or us in this work. So I just thought we could go through the various steps here of creating and implementing a data governance plan. You know, every project needs a project team. I think it's important to be clear about who is responsible for driving a project of this type, like creating a data governance plan for your organization, who is responsible for driving that forward. You'd want to review the standard and use that checklist to assess your compliance and identify gaps. Considering an audit of current data systems and practices if you have the means to do it, it's a really excellent and an important thing to do. Something that we certainly do at Logical Outcomes. Looking for good examples of privacy policies and other policies related to data governance, like data retention policies elsewhere. And there are some really good ones that I was looking up. For example, the YMCA of Greater Toronto has, I think, a really excellent, clear, detailed privacy policy available on their website that I would point people towards. Drafting your own policies and procedures, checking that they align with privacy regulations and those governance frameworks that we've talked about, and sharing with colleagues and critically community for feedback and revision. Then there's the work of training staff in the various policies and processes that are included in the data governance plan, making sure that they get implemented, monitoring your processes and outcomes, celebrating successes together as a team, and responding to issues and troubleshooting them as they arise. And this is an ongoing process, so critical to stay abreast of emerging risks as they come up on the horizon, trends, technologies, and also changing community perceptions and community needs and goals around data collection. It's really important. And so a plan gets created, but then it needs to be revisited and enhanced over time.
Awesome. And just the last bit, really again, reinforcing and re-emphasizing the importance of community engagement. So really engaging community members as partners in this whole process, either creating a community advisory group, or maybe if there's already one, using that, consulting with community members about appropriate language and categories for data collection tools. Also, this also includes updating tools and policies to ensure that language is relevant and accessible. Building systems that provide opportunities for individual choice and control. Again, we've spoken about this. Engaging community members in interpretation and sense making. Also, compensating community members for their expertise and time, really honoring that, valuing their expertise, and closing the loop, sharing results back with the community through town halls, posters, data walks, social media, whatever you think is right for your audience. But really engaging community members as partners throughout all the processes, right from when you start with your data governance policy, getting their input in that, right till the end of your data project. Sophie, do you want to talk about this?
I do want to talk about this. I was just distracted. I was responding to a question in chat. So this, I think, is a really nice example. So this is just a visualization from the City of Toronto's Black Community Data Governance Framework. So this was released recently, commissioned by the City of Toronto from the Wellesley Institute and the Black Health Alliance, and it's I think a very sophisticated example of a community engagement strategy. So it's an actionable framework for the city to adopt in the interest of meaningfully engaging Black communities in decision making around data collection, interpretation, and the use of race-based data. And what I like about it is that it clarifies key principles. So data is used for progress for Black communities, accountability, transparency in the way that data is collected and used. And then it also provides structures and processes and a set of desired outcomes that should be achieved through data projects that are meaningfully engaging Black community members. And so the scale of this initiative is it is appropriate to a city the size of Toronto. It's a very ambitious approach that is not going to be appropriate to most nonprofits, but there's still something I think really important that can be gleaned around the way that principles are developed and the structures that are recommended by this document. And I believe we're going to have a chance to learn more about this document and what went into it at a community of practice session that's going to be coming up soon.
Okay, and then wanted to hear from everybody today about how, sorry, I just need to start this. Okay. How does your organization involve community members in decisions about collecting and using participant data? Again, we'd love to get some engagement from everybody. Again, it's so interesting to see like the diversity of the group. When we were designing this presentation, I was like, I'm not really sure what to expect in terms of are we going to have people just from one group or, at the beginning, at the end, like where in the middle. So it's interesting to see people, from all, who respond to different categories. And hopefully there's something, in this workshop that's been useful for you. Okay, just gonna give it one more minute and we're basically almost towards the end. I think we just have our resources.
I'm realizing we should have included a category that says, we don't do it yet, but we are going to coming out of this workshop.
Yeah, that would be nice.
There's a question here from Jackie, which I'm going to just, oh, it's a direct message. Sorry, Jackie, I just realized that. So I'm going to think about that and respond to you directly, which I think is the best way to do it.
Okay, just looking at time, I'm going to probably gone. But thank you for engaging and if you have any sort of questions based on this, we'd be happy to discuss that. Okay, what's next? Okay, these are some tools and resources. So this page has all the references that the data standard referred to, and then in the normative references. So we're going to put this in the chat, copy paste it into the chat, and whenever the slides get uploaded to the Knowledge Hub, you can definitely get it from there. But for the meantime, we'll put this in the chat.
Meta, I'm just doing that. Hold
Okay,
on.
awesome.
To everyone.
Yes, and these are some more resources that we thought were helpful. Data.org has some really nice guides. Then Urban Institute is what Sophie referred to before as well. Then the PIPEDA principles, the privacy principles that are so important. StatCan actually has a whole catalog of data literacy training, videos and documents which might be helpful. Data maturity assessments. This is nice to do if you want to kind of figure out where you are in this journey, what you need to do next. And then the We All Counts data equity framework. So maybe, based on what your priorities are, what you want to do next, some of these resources might be helpful for you. Okay. Okay, and then the last thing, that we just wanted to end on this in this note of again like promoting that culture of sharing and learning from each other. If anybody would like to share, folks would like to share, what is the most important thing your organization does to promote data equity? Like according to you, what is something that you're really proud of, or something that that you think is really valuable and helpful that your organization does that you would like to share?
And I'm just seeing in the chat, Ali says, we generally try to maintain active community councils and draw from their recommendations for data extraction, which is fantastic to have a standing advisory committee to whom you can go, who you can involve in decision making around data collection and data usage is it's such a wonderful resource.
Yeah, and just opening the floor if anybody wants to if anybody has any comments they would like to share, some examples they want to share, questions people want to ask. It's been really nice to see you all engaged through the presentation, so thank you for that. I really like that. Only collect data that we can justify to participant for program needs, not collecting data that isn't a program used for. Okay, we've been talking for a long time.
We have, well, I'm just going to read out Jackie's question. I just asked if I could do that. So, Jackie says, would you say passive community engagement approaches, like asking a general question about opinions on a subject matter, also need disclosure that answers may be inputted into a bigger community consultation? So for example, asking a question on a piece of paper where everyone can write their answers, maybe at an outreach table. And Jackie, I don't know if you would like to unmute because I'm really curious about this and we could talk about it.
Hi, Sophie. Yeah,
Hi.
I'm more than happy to follow up if you, yeah. So I guess the question is very specific to my case and my role because we are a public library. We're always trying to get more inputs as to what the community wants from us, or even what the communities are struggling or thinking about, so that we can align our collection, our resources based on kind of align it to the community. So what we normally do is sometimes we don't do surveys. Sometimes there is a team of us that just do outreach outside, general, very casual conversation, or sometimes we do provide tools like a giant piece of paper to pop up a question and then get the community engaged to write things down. And then that sometimes will then funneled into helping us inform our strategic plan, for example, for the next 4 years. So these are what we call like our passive our passive community engagement. So to go back to some of the points about disclosure and privacy and all of that safety metrics, I'm just wondering, should those passive engagement times also be disclosed to the community, that your answer will also may or may not be part of like a bigger, I guess, database?
Yeah, I think so. I think
Mhm,
that that's important. And because people are there, it sounds like a wonderful way to collect data, by the way, and not that passive. Actually, it sounds
mhm,
like an active way to engage community members,
mhm,
taking advantage of existing kind of flows to your
mhm,
agency, which is, or to your library, which is fantastic, like really great way to do it.
mhm,
And I think it does make sense to say this is why we want to hear from people. And maybe you don't want to say that every time somebody comes up to the big piece of paper, but perhaps to have in a few different languages that are the most
mhm,
commonly spoken by people who use the library, to have some signage, some really simple
mhm,
signage saying why you're doing what you're doing
mhm,
would be
mhm,
important. And I would also think if there's somebody sitting there, then it isn't an anonymous form of engagement, which is okay. Like one knows that as one approaches the table, right? But
mhm,
perhaps in addition to that, you're putting up a QR code to like an anonymous, very short suggestion. We call it a suggestion poll that basically is like very short consent form, and then how can we improve our services or how can we better serve you? Just maybe a single question, open text. And so that way people have an anonymous way of sharing complaints and suggestions for improvement.
mhm. Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you. We've had some really nice responses in the Menti and also some people in the chat. Um, Aligning with the philosophy of nothing about us without us approach with anti-oppression, anti-racism, and harm reduction framework. Thank you for sharing that. Using Dillman's methods for constructing clear survey questions, not leading questions, not double barrel. That's so important to have like nicely formatted surveys, like nicely created surveys, and working with community partners to promote opportunities. Oh, wonderful.
And Sharman also says we have a very participatory approach to our evaluation process, starting from designing the evaluation to data interpretation. We also value and prioritize the lived experiences of the communities we serve through our program and evaluation, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, I think that brings us Oops. Brings us to the end. So thank you everybody for being here and participating so much. That's our, if you want to get in touch with us, that's how you can do it. This QR code is a feedback form. So if you have, if you want to give feedback for this workshop, we really want to know how this experience was for you, what was useful for you, and how we can improve workshops going forward. So it'd be great to hear from you. Yeah, anything else, Sophie?
I'm seeing more comments, which I now want to respond to. Okay, so a question about getting the workshop slides. Those are going to be available on a website really soon, and I believe that everybody who has registered for today is going to receive an email when that happens, although Kasal, perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong about that.
That is correct, Sophie. Thank you.
Okay, that's wonderful. And I'm just going to respond to Sangeeta's question about good examples of policies around collection and use of health equity and socio-demographic data. And I would recommend taking a look at the Black Health Equity Working Group's EGAP principles. I think those are fantastic. That's what I'm thinking of right off the top of my head. And yes, there's a comment here about not yet receiving an email for the materials from the last workshop, and I know that the website is a work in progress, but is going to be posted really soon, right? 211 Find Help.
Yes, yes. And yes, we do apologize. We did hope that we could get it today. We were just putting our final touches and passing final approvals before it goes live. And so we are hoping, from what I'm seeing today, that next week at our community of practice, we'll be able to do a bit of demo of what that looks like, and all the materials thus far will be uploaded and available all throughout the rest of the year. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we are flying this plane and building it at the same time. So thank you so much. Thank you.
Sophie, do you mind putting the feedback form in the chat as well in
Oh, of
case
course.
you did get it from there?
Yeah, let me do that.
And as folks are leaving us for the day, just wanted to just chime in to say that there'll be another round of registrations for the next stage of this workshop. So also be on the lookout for that. So thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you everybody. Thank you everybody for joining. Thank you everybody for being here and sharing your time.
Thank you so much, everybody. And thank you, Find Help, for convening this and doing so much work to make the series of workshops happen, and including logical outcomes.
Thank you, Logical Outcomes. It was a great workshop. Thank you. I see all your accolades coming through the chat there.
Okay. Bye, everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.